September 2001, a student is attacked in Williamsburg, Virginia.
She was scared for her life. She then decided to be compliant in hopes that it would mitigate any harm that was being done to her.
Beat her up fairly well, too. I mean, she had some, it wasn't just a rape, she had some pretty significant physical injuries.
She had dirt and leaves on her. She had no shoes on. She had some red marks on her face and her neck.
Within months, there is a second violent attack.
Based on the description and the circumstances, we were pretty sure it would be the same person that had raped the other young lady a few months before.
It kind of sent chills up my back, honestly. I was quite disturbed by it. I had never been through something like this, and I thought we were under attack.
Despite an extensive investigation, the perpetrator evades detection and accumulates more victims.
2 foreign females came in contact with a man that pulled up in a pickup truck and offered them a ride. And one of the girls ended up having a report of a rape with her.
Now we have this individual involved in a third crime.
We had some guy that was able to evade the police and repeatedly commit violent crimes and avoid detection.
We start to, I guess, lose hope that we're going to be able to identify this individual.
This is the story of 4 innocent victims, how their attacker eluded justice for years, and how a revolutionary DNA method made him another successful target of the Bloodline Detectives.
We knew the DNA of this offender, but we just didn't know his name.
Without familial DNA, he would have continued to go unnoticed.
The first thing I thought is that's some pretty damn good police work.
Without the invention of that and the advent of it, this would have remained a cold case. There's no way everything else we tried failed.
September the 12th, 2001. Police in Williamsburg, Virginia receive a 911 call.
The call was a female that had knocked on a door of a residence in the Zelkova neighborhood. It's a small condo community off of Parkway Drive, and reported that she was raped.
Patrol officers are dispatched to the residential address to interview the victim.
There was the lady that called the phone for the female, and a female who was initially not very communicative.
Pants had been pulled off. She had been in the woods, so she was all covered with leaves and such. Because it was September, the leaves were falling. And she was very disoriented and very upset.
She had no shoes on. She had some red marks on her face and her neck. She was sitting on the floor.
Conscious they are speaking with a petrified victim, officers gently uncover the events surrounding the attack.
This young woman who was an employee at Busch Gardens, working there on their cultural exchange program.
Busch Gardens is a theme park, roller coaster rides, big tourist attraction.
Every year, Busch Gardens will bring a whole slew of college-age kids that will come here from Europe. And they live in this converted motel. They call it the Student Village.
English was a second language for her. She was from Hungary.
She said that she had been walking home from the Food Lion back toward the International Village.
She'd walked down Parkway Drive where this occurred, and on the way back from Food Lion, the grocery store, she was approached by a man.
Someone had come up from behind her, grabbed her over the mouth and forehead, and ended up pulling her into the woods and sexually assaulting her. She was scared for her life. She was willing to fight to a point, and then when she realized that that was not going to be successful, she then decided to be compliant in hopes that it would mitigate any harm that was being done to her.
Beat her up fairly well too. I mean, she had it wasn't just a rape, she had some pretty significant physical injuries.
She suffered some scrapes and abrasions to her wrist, to her neck, to her, there was redness and bruising around her eyes and around her forehead as well.
She had like a fanny pack on that he ended up finding when he disrobed her and took the contents of it, which included her passport and cash.
Stunned from the attack, the victim gradually collects herself and runs to a neighbor's house.
When it ended, and she was told to stay sitting in the woods and not turn around, she followed those instructions for, again, a few more minutes. But once she felt it was safe and he was no longer, hovering above her or behind her, she ran to an apartment complex that was somewhat adjacent to those woods and went to the first building she could find.
This is actually pretty important in any rape case, is that she makes what's called a fresh complaint. In other words, she didn't wait 2 or 3 days to come up and say, hey, I was raped or something, or just go back home and cry or anything. She ran straight to this other house.
With the facts established, officers now escort the victim to hospital.
The paramedics take her to the hospital where a sane nurse meets her and begins the process of collecting evidence from her.
And that's how they were able to determine some DNA, during the course of, from the person who had raped her.
The nurses are trained not only to do the examination, but also to talk to the persons that are in that position that she was in and try to help us obtain all the details that maybe we missed. And then we also had investigators called out to respond to the scene, and actually came to the hospital and took over for me.
The perk kit that was collected by the sane nurse was sent off, as well as other items that were found at the scene. And what they're looking for is some trace evidence of who possibly could have done this to her.
While the victim is being cared for, detectives visit the scene of the crime.
The officers on scene would have been knocking on doors, trying to come up with some type of suspect that we could go look for.
We had to find the location where it actually happened. It was nighttime initially, and she had left from the area, so we had to go back and find the scene where it occurred to see if maybe there's clues left.
At that location, they found a shoe, and they did find her socks, and they found a pair of underwear that she had previously described as having been torn from her, and they did find that underwear torn in a area of leaves and woods.
There were some physical signs that people had been there and laying on the ground, like the leaves had been pushed around and pushed away. It looked like that was consistent with what had happened.
A full investigation is launched with a canvass of the area and a sketch of the attacker released.
She did describe this individual as not skinny, not fat, but sporty, an athletic build, and she said he was strong enough that he overpowered her and was able to pull her into the woods despite her trying to fight him off.
She did give the description of a black male, 5'10" or so, slim build.
Even from her description, I think the police knew early on that she probably wasn't going to be able to identify this individual because of the way he had controlled her and stayed behind her or stayed in darker areas. So they were looking for some biological evidence that could help them identify who did this to her.
The standard protocol would be look for known offenders, in our area that have a similar interest or history, and try to see if any of them might have had, an ability or more in a position to commit the crime.
We did a composite description, and we put it out there for everybody. Matter of fact, we put it out there more than a few times throughout the years.
They'd have looked for people with similar MOs who were not behind bars. They would certainly knock on a lot of doors.
With no immediate leads, investigators are hoping that the rape kit sample will yield a hit.
The results were, as far as the investigation go, outstanding. They were able to find very clear, more biological evidence than we get in most cases. And so they were able to develop a very clear, very unique DNA identifier for whoever had sexually assaulted her.
It did go into CODIS. And at the first time it went in, we didn't get anything. There was no known suspect at that point.
With no solid leads, the case is gradually being wound down. But then the attacker claims another victim.
We knew the DNA of this offender, but we just didn't know his name.
In March 2002, investigators in Williamsburg, Virginia, are searching for a sexual predator who raped an international student in a surprise attack 6 months previously.
They were able to find very clear, more biological evidence than we get in most cases.
It did go into CODIS. And at the first time it went in, we didn't get anything. There was no known suspect at that point.
Then, on March the 23rd, police receive a call. Another student has been attacked in the same area.
A student from one of the local colleges was walking home late one night. It was a rather cold night. After she walked through campus, she was going down Jamestown Road, heading towards her home.
This particular part of Jamestown Road was between Lake Matoka, which is where the college boundary kind of stops, and a church called Walnut Hills Baptist Church on the side of Jamestown Road. There's an intersection with the traffic light at John Tyler Highway. It's before you get there.
As she was walking, she heard somebody behind her, and she termed it as somebody running. And then, as it caught her attention, the subject slowed down and started to walk, and then caught up to her. He then engaged her in some conversation and talked about, she said, how cold it was that night. And he had told her, well, I can warm you up. And then they continued, and at that point, he put his hand over her mouth and tried to pull her over a guardrail down an embankment, which is very similar to what happened in 2001.
He got her as far as the guardrail and got her over the guardrail, and his hand ended up being positioned by her face, and she bit him on the hand hard enough to draw blood.
He released her, and she was able to run into the roadway where a car was coming down the road and stop that car.
That person that stopped ended up calling the police, and she gave a description that was pretty consistent with what the victim told us about what he looked like and his clothing and general appearance.
This was a situation that was eerily similar to the incident that the police had been investigating from September of 2001.
This case, she was American. She was a college student. She was similar in age and height and weight and general physical characteristics to the first victim.
Investigators interview the victim and search the area where the attack happened.
She described where he'd run to, and we looked for him. We also followed the direction where he went. Ended up calling a dog out.
The officers on scene were able to help her out, start getting statements, and they got an initial description of the subject wearing a red jacket with a white stripe. One of the local college police officers heard what was going on, came to assist, and actually found the jacket a short distance away from where the attack occurred.
He ran across Jamestown Road into a church parking lot right there and took his coat off and left it. It was covered in blood, and he took his coat off and just left it in the parking lot.
In this case, there wasn't a completed rape, there wasn't a robbery, there was just an attempted abduction. But based on the description and the circumstances, we were pretty sure it would be the same person that had raped the other young lady a few months before.
Once that is sent to the lab, same thing as the September case. It's an excellent sample. The lab is able to identify the DNA profile of this individual, but this individual is not in any known database, and so they can't identify it by a name, but what they can do is say this is the same DNA profile as your suspect on the September 2001 case.
The second attack creates a wave of fear throughout the student community.
There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of concern about it occurring again. There was a lot of anxiety put toward the police department for us to figure out who he was.
It did have the feel of a serial rapist that we did not know going around our community and attacking young women.
And when it came back that there was a match, it kind of sent chills up my back, honestly. I was quite disturbed by it. I thought we were under attack, quite honestly. I had never been through something like this, and I felt very compelled that this case needed to be worked for our community.
With a serial sexual predator on the loose, the investigation is reinvigorated.
We looked at recent arrest data with new offenses that might either, not necessarily the same sort of a crime, but something that could be like a precursor crime or an associated crime like a stalking, like a lesser offense like a stalking or a peeping Tom, possibly a trespassing, or even just a complaint that didn't lead to a charge of a suspicious nature that might seem like somebody hunting for a victim.
The perpetrator continues to avoid detection and appears to have gone quiet. But then there is another, more brazen attack.
It was on a summer evening in 2006, July. Two foreign younger females were walking from a bar in the city of Williamsburg called the Library Tavern and walking back to their lodging. And they were taking a shortcut through Bypass Road, which is in York County.
It was a little bit different in that it involved a vehicle as opposed to walking along the side of the road.
They came in contact with a man that pulled up in a pickup truck and offered them a ride. And they ended up going with the guy in the pickup truck. And he took a turn that they hadn't asked him to make, and one of the girls was able to bail out of the truck while it was moving and jump out of the truck and escape with minor injuries. The other female wasn't able to escape. The next day, she was found with injuries far away from where she was supposed to be, off another part of Williamsburg, and ended up having a report of a rape with her.
The culprit in that York County case left the biological evidence as well, and that evidence was sent to the lab, and now we have this individual involved in a third crime. Again, the DNA profile is an exact match.
The escalation in this attack is deeply disturbing for investigators.
Williamsburg is a sleepy town where we want to be able to walk along the wooded roads in this community and feel safe. And we didn't feel safe because we knew this individual was still out there. I believe that sexual assault is horribly unreported. Even when it's not someone you know, even when it is a stranger, the prospects of talking to the police about this horrible event, the prospects of being put in front of a jury and telling this story of what happened to you, that's not something that I think people get excited about. And so I think there are a number of women who have been sexually assaulted who just live with it rather than sharing it with anyone that helps bring justice to that act.
Another investigation is launched into this attack, but once again, detectives hit a dead end.
We now had a vehicle description that we could superimpose with our physical description. And by the way, the physical description was very similar. These victims reported that the suspect was wearing eyeglasses like our second victim did.
We then, we started working with York County and saying, hey, listen, this is what we have. And we started going back through old cases and trying to strum up some more leads on this.
It was sort of like, the Williamsburg's boogeyman. We had some guy that was able to evade the police and repeatedly commit violent crimes and avoid detection. So I wanted to say, not on my watch. I wanted to be able to figure out who the guy was if I could.
The number of leads start to diminish. We start to, lose hope that we're going to be able to identify this individual.
For another 6 years, there is no movement in the case. But in 2012, a new DNA method becomes available. Could it finally help them solve the crime?
Hey, we got a new idea. And it's called familial DNA, and we're going to see what maybe we can do with this.
By 2012, law enforcement officers in Williamsburg, Virginia, are still trying to identify the sexual predator who's been responsible for 3 separate attacks between 2001 and 2006.
It did have the feel of a serial rapist that we did not know going around our community and attacking young women.
But in 2012, a new DNA searching tool becomes available.
I had called one of the scientists from the DNA lab that I'd gotten to know over the years of doing this, named Bob Scanlon, and I asked him if he could help me figure out for sure if this one particular offender was in the data bank and if we could eliminate him. And he did that, and then he asked me if I was open to possibly participating in a project.
I would see Lang Pat crossing the halls, and he just started telling me, he goes, hey, we got a new idea. And it's called familial DNA, and we're going to see what maybe we can do with this.
A familial search is a deliberate search that is not looking for a direct match to the DNA, but rather it's looking for an indirect type of association, either parent-offspring type relationship or a sibling type relationship.
The Williamsburg investigation team makes the decision to utilize it in the hope it will identify new leads.
My initial reaction was, this is going to be it. They're going to be able to give us a report, and that's going to lead to us making an arrest, and science is going to be the hero of this case.
Lang felt very good about this. And I know we kept in touch with Bob Scanlon through the years. And Bob was another one who really wanted to see this case solved. This was a collaborative team effort with everybody involved.
We get a call that we have a strong candidate here. We can say the name, but just know it is not this individual.
Finally, investigators have uncovered a name.
We came up with Kenneth Holloway.
Mr. Holloway, Kenneth Holloway, could not have committed these crimes. I believe he was actually incarcerated at the time that some of these incidents took place. They're able to identify a number of brothers that Kenneth Holloway has. They're able to pretty quickly eliminate some of those brothers, either because of age, how old they would have been in 2001, 2006. They're also able to eliminate some because of where they were located at those times. I think there was a brother that was in Europe, I believe stationed in the Army. And so they were able to eliminate all of the brothers except for one.
Tyrone Holloway appeared to be the most likely person. He also was the person who lived closest to the Williamsburg jurisdiction at the time.
However, to prove he is the deviant, detectives need to obtain a sample of his DNA.
They knew that they could not use what information had been provided by the lab to just get a warrant. We had made that agreement. So they were going to have to keep working this lead. Their idea of working it was to observe him and try to find a time that he discarded something that could be usable evidence. some piece of garbage that would not be the subject of a search warrant because he had thrown it away, but rather they could collect it and then send that item to the lab and see if they could get a result, not off the familial DNA, but rather a direct result from something that they knew Mr. Tyrone Holloway had discarded.
They modeled what they did after what happened with the Grim Sleeper in California, where they followed him around and got a piece of pizza that he discarded, and were able to get a DNA sample that way.
They tracked him down to South Carolina, to where they were following him around, trying to catch up with him to get something he would discard.
We watched him throw a small, like a plastic bag you might get at Walmart, full of trash, into a dumpster. And I climbed in the dumpster and pulled the bag out. There was a fast food cup with a straw in it and stuff like that.
Chewing gum, receipts, some eyeglasses, some hair clippings or something like that. But it was possible that those were his child's. But all of that was brought back to Virginia with us.
Wasn't good news though. It was they developed a female profile on 2 or 3 of the items that I submitted, and then a mixture on 1.
They basically told us there was not enough there, that we were on the right track, but they couldn't definitively say yes or no.
In December 2012, officers returned to South Carolina determined to retrieve a sample.
We made arrangements to go back a second time. At this point, we knew where he worked. We knew where he was living. And so we continued to surveil him in between his residence and his place of work.
We watched him leave again in the little white car he was using at this point. And as we followed him back from Marion into Conway, which is closer to Myrtle Beach than Marion was where he worked, he went through a drive-through of a Zaxby's restaurant. As he leaves there, he ran a light, and I didn't push it. I let it go because I thought he was going to work. Well, when I went to his work, his car wasn't there. Eventually, we saw Mr. Holloway come to work. He got out of his little white car, didn't have anything in his hands. I was in a position, he parked like right behind me, I could see clearly. Didn't have anything in his hands, went right in the front door, and didn't look like he dropped anything. But so I went and looked anyway. I went and looked in the trash can by the door, and I went and looked in his windows and of his car.
We went up to the vehicle. We didn't see the meal bag or any of the remnants of that. Well, we did see some garment racks that were in the back of his car.
So we looked up where you can get essential home clothing racks, and it's essentially, we found could be any big box store. It was like Walmart was listed, Lowe's, Kmart, like pretty much any of the big box stores.
Investigator Craighill, Investigator Riley spend the next few hours going around to these locations to try and find where did he buy these.
We searched for approximately an hour every store in the area that could possibly contain these racks. And we were just unable to figure out where he had gone.
We had been to a Pizza Hut a couple times for dinner, and we went to the same Pizza Hut, like right up the street from this convalescent center where he worked. And we happened to have the same waitress.
Again, I'm not sure I can ever understand how Lang had the instincts to do this, but he asks his waitress, and he shows her a picture of the boxes and says, "Have you ever seen anything like these? Do you know where I could buy these around here?" And she says, "Well, they might be sold at the Kmart." They had already checked a Kmart, the Kmart that was on the internet.
She said, "Why would you go there? There's one just around the corner." And we were kind of stunned. You know?
So we went and looked, and the trash had been pulled. There was 2 cans right in front of the doors, and the trash had been pulled. It was sitting outside of the cans, like it was waiting for it to be collected. And I went to one can, and Greg went to the other one. And I could hear, I heard Greg make this like little noise when he opened the lid of it, and right on top of the not very much refuse was a Zaxby's bag.
I looked down, and the only thing in the garbage can was a Zaxby's bag with the discarded meal and the receipt, which was time-stamped. And we knew instantly we had what we were coming to look for.
In prosecution, you don't rely on magic, but there was something magical about this circumstances that led to them finding that bag of garbage.
I went inside the store to talk to the management. They provided us with video surveillance showing him entering the store, purchasing the garment racks, and leaving the store.
In all my years, it's the most amazing piece of police work and instincts and doggedness to just stay after it. And they were rewarded, we were rewarded.
Police send the material back to Virginia for forensic analysis.
I couldn't get hold of Bob, so I called my lieutenant from investigations who does forensics, and I asked for advice on packaging the stuff, preservation, and he said basically ice it.
They do submit it to evidence where it would then get sent to the Department of Forensic Science, where the scientists would then do a DNA test on it, try to collect off it.
The DNA on those chicken bones matches the DNA on the blood on the coat, matches the DNA from the semen from the rape in the woods. This is the guy.
Investigators immediately begin preparations for Holloway's arrest.
We went back, but essentially he was gone. Every place we looked for him, we couldn't find him. We then went through the process to track him by his phone, by his cell phone, to figure out where he might be.
We started pinging his phone. And wouldn't you know it, he was no longer in South Carolina. They had gone the wrong direction. He was now north of Virginia in Philadelphia. And so they have to turn around and head, instead of south, back north, past Williamsburg, on up to Philadelphia.
At that point, we were a little vexed. We didn't know where he was in Philadelphia. We just know he had gone there.
We were, of course, concerned that maybe he was hunting. Maybe he's doing what he does. So, but we realized we had absolutely no idea what he was driving. Every vehicle we knew about, we had accounted for and was in Marion. And we had no idea what he was wearing. And we're getting imprecise pings of a wanted person that, would be kind of hard to find, needle in a haystack in Philadelphia.
The following morning, we were able to obtain a ping that was within 7 meters of a hotel in Philadelphia. We continued to monitor his pings. One of the pings showed him at a repair shop. We called Philadelphia PD. They sent an officer, and Mr. Holloway was placed under arrest. They asked him if he wanted to speak to the investigators from Williamsburg. He said yes. They transported him to their local jail facility, and we made the long drive from South Carolina to Philadelphia.
They took him in custody, and we had charged him at that point with abduction, with intent to defile, rape, and robbery.
Williamsburg investigators arrive in Philadelphia to interview Holloway. What will they learn about him, and will he confess to the crimes?
He was conniving. I could just see the wheels were turning on how could I explain away these facts.
On December the 23rd, 2012, Tyrone Holloway is tracked down and arrested in Philadelphia for raping 3 women in Williamsburg, Virginia between 2001 and 2006.
I felt all along that Mr. Holloway thought he was smarter than the rest of us.
I think he really thought he got away with it, and he was never going to get caught, and he would never be caught.
So who is Tyrone Holloway, and how has he not come to police attention before?
Mr. Holloway is about 5'8", black male, rather thin, wore glasses, not a rather imposing figure.
He is intelligent, he is manipulative, and he is conniving.
I thought he was a very cool and calculating type person.
Williamsburg detectives, who have been working the case for over a decade, finally get to question him.
And they start talking to him about what he knows about this incident in 2001, what his whereabouts were in 2001, 2006.
But we decided to be not direct about how much we actually did know. Not mention anything about forensics, but to go with essentially that he was accused of a rape by someone that had seen his composite and identified him.
This is a lot to swallow, I mean, like I said, I have met some girls and I have been out with some people, and I have slept with multiple people, but I don't recall, and I'm not being funny, and don't have anything wrong with my mind.
He acted like he didn't know anything that we were talking about.
I don't think any of it's
You don't think anything is true?
No, I mean, I know. I'm confident in myself.
He's being charged with incidents that had happened, 11, 12 years ago. So, I mean, he claimed at that point to pretty much be in the dark about all this.
I even at one point showed him a photograph of one of the victims, the first victim actually, and he told me he remembered her. He told me that that was one of the young ladies that he had sex with at some point.
It's a simple yes or no
Correct.
question. Have you had sex with her?
She looks familiar. Yeah, I've had sex with her.
Okay.
I don't know why I'm here. Why are you guys doing this? But in the course of our discussion, he did make some statements that implicated him in the crimes.
I wish I could recall that night.
You're saying you don't remember?
No, I remember I remember me and bleeding.
Well, if you wished, you remember you and bleeding. Okay, well, how were you bleeding? Why were you bleeding?
I don't know why I would be. I mean, I don't bleed all the time. I'm saying I do things all the time to make myself bleed.
We were advised to arrest at that point based on that amount of evidence with that type of charge.
Once he was charged, they went and took an official sample, with the buccal swabs and whatever, and, went back and ran it again.
The swab comes back as a 100% match, and Holloway is brought to Williamsburg to stand trial.
Our strongest and most serious case was the September 12th rape that took place in the woods. I made the decision that we would split the prosecution into two stages. He was arrested on both assaults, the one in September from 2001, as well as the assault and the attempted rape from 2006. We went forward on the preliminary hearing for the 2006 incident so that we could be sure to hold him over for a trial in the circuit court. Once we were able to do that, in circuit court, I indicted the case from 2001. So we did a preliminary hearing from the 2006 case, but the trial was on the 2001 case.
On December the 18th, 2013, the trial for the 2001 attack begins.
We had what's called a motion to suppress. His claim was that he did not throw the Zaxby's bag of garbage and chicken bones away.
They accused the police of improper conduct, accused me of improper conduct. They tried everything to try to get out of it.
And then Mr. Holloway testified, and that's somewhat rare for a suppression hearing for the defendant to actually testify, but he did.
He all of a sudden tells me that he finally remembered what happened that night, and that he had sex with this young lady, but it had been consensual sex, and she had only cried rape when he had refused to give her any money after they were done, and that he had a star witness who was there for the whole thing.
Investigator Craig Hill testified and described the way that he found the bag at Kmart. I think it's very clear that the story that Investigator Craig Hill told is the truth. Mr. Holloway was trying to find a way to get around the evidence.
They attacked the credibility of the witness. They made up a scenario which wasn't true, accusing the witness or the victim of improper conduct.
He says he had cats, and the cats like to eat the chicken bones. I don't have cats. I don't know if that's true or not. But he said, that he would always save these bones for his cats, and that the police obviously had gone into his automobile to retrieve them. And if that had been the case, or if it could have been established that is the case, this whole thing would have come tumbling down.
He claims that after the act was done, she demanded money, and he told her, "I don't ever pay for sex," and that upset her. He then said, because she was upset and he was done, he decided to take her to the Food Lion, give her $20 to go buy him and his friend beer, and as soon as she was out of the car, he drove away.
His star witness is a young man named Christopher Chestnut. And when he told me that, I can't remember if I laughed or not, but I had to tell him. I said, Tyrone, I've known Chris Chestnut for a long time. I prosecuted him when he was a juvenile. He's simply not a credible person.
He had made mention in reports that he had a $176 million lottery ticket. He was a big winner, but he refused to cash that ticket because he didn't want to share it with his wife. That, to me, seemed crazy. He also made mention that he was a DEA informant and that he had worked with the police. Well, these were stories that I was aware of, and Mr. Chestnut's involvement with law enforcement was only in his mind.
The victim, who has waited 12 years and traveled thousands of miles to give her testimony, finally gets to face her attacker and hold him accountable.
There's a hope that giving them that opportunity gives them also a sense of closure. But I'm not obtuse to the fact that I am reopening an old wound and making her talk about this, not with her friends or with her family, but with 12 strangers, and describe this horribly violent act that was committed against her.
Not only did she have to, recreate the event and for other people and strangers, she had to relive it for herself. She had to face him directly, the person, and accuse him. It had to be just awful.
All survivors of sexual assault that have to come into a courtroom and relive the worst moments of their life are incredibly brave. She did get emotional, but she maintained her composure. She was great.
The jury returns after only 2 hours of deliberating.
When they came out and found him guilty, it was a huge relief. And when they gave the amount of time, that was also a huge relief. And I'm certain that was a vindication for the victim, not just the one that was in court, but the other ladies too, I'm sure.
What I was surprised about a little bit is that, after they found him guilty, I was at least somewhat surprised that he only got 33 years.
So what kind of person is Tyrone Holloway? And has he shown any remorse?
He was conniving. I could just see the wheels were turning on how could I explain away these facts.
What the victim had gone through in this particular case would never be described as consensual. And for him to make that defense is it's not taking responsibility for your actions or anything like that.
So is there justice or closure for the victims?
When somebody's gotten up and they've actually gone through this and testified and gotten it over with, and gotten some vindication from the sentence, well, I suppose there's closure.
This is, I think, a clear example of justice and the justice system working properly, where there's plenty of examples of it not doing so. This is probably one that would be a good one to show how it does.
Her life was not going to be defined by the horrible acts of this man on this night. She didn't forget it. She did not, it was part of her, but she was able to have it only be a part, not the sum total of who she is.
Another case that would likely have remained unsolved has come to a successful conclusion with the help of familial DNA.
The science of familial DNA was invaluable to the lead that identified Tyrone Holloway.
10 out of 10 in importance, because that's how they figured out who it was.
Without familial DNA, he would have continued to go unnoticed.
Without the invention of that and the advent of it, this would have remained a cold case. There's no way everything else we tried failed.
The Williamsburg Police Department can finally close the case and feel pride that they put Holloway behind bars.
I have to give a lot of credit to investigator Craig Hill, that he was extremely dogged in pursuing this. Of course, that's Lang's nature. He's extremely dogged in everything he pursues.
Honestly, the first thing I thought is that's some pretty damn good police work. That was my initial impression, was kind of interesting. I mean, I really thought that's pretty good police work.
The elation we feel that, you know, our victims now can move on with their lives and they can have a better life knowing that they're safe and everyone is safe. That's the closure we're looking for.